Pledge of Allegiance by Councilwoman Ryder. Please stand if you're able.
Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, please call the roll.
Councilman Fugit.
Here.
Councilman Helsley.
Here.
Councilwoman McKenzie. Councilwoman Parker. Councilwoman Ryder.
Here.
Councilman Roberto.
Here.
Councilwoman Singh. Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
And Councilman Thomas. 6 members present, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Welcome to everybody that's here in the audience. Thank you for everybody at home that is watching or will watch this. Today's workshop is about ordinances and enforcement. And we have members of the city staff who are over those departments who will give us a presentation about past, present, and future. Hopefully some reporting, some numbers, but also some glimpses of policy changes for the future. So I see Chief Deputy Ball here, Mr. Rosenberg, Mr. Weth, thank you all for being here. I don't know which one of you will get started, but please lead us off and encourage council members to ask questions during the presentation. There'll be a few minutes at the end, but don't save them. So, Mr. Weth.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Smith. Good evening, welcome. Vice Mayor already mentioned the agenda, but just so you all know, I'm Chad Weth. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and I apologize, but you get to listen to me tonight. But I have a whole panel of esteemed colleagues with me that will also be here to answer questions. So if I could just take just a real quick minute and just introduce them. Obviously, you know Grant and Cheryl, COO and Chief Policy Officer. From Codes Enforcement, we have Rachel Butzler, who's the Public Service Director, and Scott Elder, who's the Codes Enforcement Section Manager. Zoning, Brian Berry from Zoning is the Deputy Director. Talk about scooters, we have John Livengood, who's Transportation Engineer. Carter Hall is also here. He's the Deputy Director of the Center of Service Innovation. He kicked scooters off many years ago, so he's also here. Short-term rentals, we have Cheryl Ball, and then Donna Dyer, who's the Revenue Administrator, will be speaking on that. So not to leave out Russ Jensen, who's also in the back. He's the Director of 311. So we have several things to cover tonight. Obviously, there's neighborhood codes enforcement. We're going to talk about zoning enforcement, short-term rentals, and scooters. So there's a lot. There's only 13 slides, so we're not going to bore you too much with slides. Do definitely encourage you all to ask any questions as they come up. Also, just I know there's probably several specific addresses that is on your minds. We are going to try to just focus on process tonight, but of course, if you guys have any specific addresses that you'd like to talk about, we'll be here afterwards, and we'd be happy to catch you up on those or fill you in.
I thought you were going to offer real-time lookup. We could just
Real-time
do-
lookup.
No, okay. Is that what Grant and Cheryl are here for? Very good. Okay, good to see.
Yeah, yeah. KGIS on the ready.
There we go.
We can do that. So we'll go ahead and get started. With our first slide, we are going to talk about neighborhood codes enforcement. So neighborhood codes, just overall, broadly discusses, investigates and enforces environmental code regulations involving dirty and overgrown lots, inoperable abandoned vehicles, dilapidated housing, and solid waste violations. The biggest thing that we are here to do from a codes enforcement stance is to address safety and health issues. And then I can't emphasize enough to identify and deter disinvestment and to create opportunities to support private investment. We've got a few slides talking about that a little bit later, but that is happening a great deal right now. As you know, the housing market's pretty good, and turning these houses around happens all the time. I've been on properties just last week that this is going on. So these are great examples of a house on Fifth Avenue at the bottom that you see was kind of in a state of disrepair, and that's what it looks like now on the right after it's been turned around and reinvested. And again, if you guys have any questions, please jump in, and we will answer those as they come about.
You asked, and
Ask and you shall receive.
Councilman
I see
Roberto,
it.
answer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the previous slide where you were talking about, what was it? Where was the cars? Abandoned vehicles. So what I was going to ask you about is, certainly I hear sometimes about abandoned vehicles, but I've also heard before, and you and I have talked about this before, but where you have an abundance of vehicles parked somewhere where they, like in somebody's backyard, for instance, or a driveway is just full of cars. And sometimes they're not, necessarily, they're functional. But my question is, what procedure are you dealing with now with there being, cars parked? And I'm not talking about one car. We're talking about like lots of cars. Like 15 cars, or basically what amounts to a small used car lot, basically. What kind of, can you talk to us a little bit about policy? Like, has that changed? Have you shifted any with what that looks like from an enforcement side?
You want to come up, talk, Scott? You can come up a little bit. I will say, one thing that we try to encourage, there's certain things, and Scott can talk about it, what we look for when a car is abandoned or inoperable. It has to meet a few criteria. We are certainly, looking into better options about, you can't just move a battery into a car and have it operable. Like, it has to be functioning. Things like it can't have expired tags, broken windows, things like that. It has to have two criteria. I'll let Scott talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so there's no limit on how many cars you can actually have as long as they're functioning. We see that with people with lots of children. It's just a common thing. And this kind of translates into zoning, as long as they're parked legally. So front yard is not okay, corner side yard is not okay. But as long as they are functional, even if they don't have tags, we typically look at two different criteria. It has to have, there's a list of broken windows, flat tires, missing parts. If they have two criteria, then we can do something about it. But there's really no limit as long as they're functional cars.
So,
And parked legally.
so it's going to be parked legally, it's going to be a functional car. So with regard to the functional car, I know you were talking about like operationally functional, but also to be a functional car, wouldn't you need to be able to drive legally on the road? So you have to have car insurance, you need to have registered the vehicle. Are those things that we're looking at too?
Those are two of the criteria. There's actually 6 items. It's one that says you have to, and they get a little bit more nuanced. So there's a list of things that are obvious. Disassembled, just can't run. The others are, it has to be able to drive. More than one broken windows, something. But it just kind of depends. We can't get into people's registrations, and we can't knock on the door and ask for registration and insurance. We're not the police, so.
I understand. Okay. And then with regard to what is obviously commercial equipment with either parking on lots or, in driveways all the time, what are we looking at with that? I hear that from time to time as well.
That may be a little more zoning related.
Okay.
On more of a use type.
Well, and we typically look at what would be requiring a CDL, a commercial driver's license. So if you have a truck that's greater than like 26,000 pounds, that moves into a different category than just a regular personal vehicle, right? So at that point, if you have trailers and construction equipment and things like that, that'd be different than our regular codes enforcement.
I'll pick that up when we get to zoning, then I'll let my colleagues ask.
Okay.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Thank you. So, following up on Councilman Roberto's questions, if something isn't in compliance, how long do you have to correct it? Is there a fine, maximum fine, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things we hear from frustrated neighbors.
Yeah, well, there's a slide that actually shows kind of our enforcement criteria a little bit later, but yes.
Are you telling me I'm jumping ahead?
No, that's
Sorry.
fine. Figure that's going to happen a lot. No worries. So yes, if it's on private property, it's 7 days. If it's inoperable that they have to get working. The last thing we really want to do is tow it, but so we will
Absolutely.
work with owners as much as we can. But they do have 7 days to get it working. If it's on public property, they actually have 48 hours, 2 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you tow it, then I assume it costs money to get it back, and I'll wait for the slide.
Correct. They just go to our impound, and then the owner would be responsible for the charges.
Thank you.
Go back, still the finish one, last one. Just a couple other things on this slide. I always say that, I tell Scott this all the time, to me, codes is pretty easy on the front end. It's the back end stuff that kind of gets tricky, because the biggest thing we really want to do is educate. Sometimes people simply just don't know. Now, that's not always the case. There's always some bad actors out there. But most of the time, our initial enforcement piece is really education. To educate the person, we always give them, whether it's 7 days for a car, 10 days for a lot. And our hope and our goal is that they will fix the structure issues or, overgrown, dirty lot. Our hope is that they will repair those. And one other thing I'd just like to say, that we are doing a much better job, and we'll get into this with zoning, on visiting properties, multiple facets. Like, we will visit with zoning or KPD or KFD if we need to, and look at these in a more broad scope. We're doing that better now than I've ever seen since I've been here for too long now, 16 years. We really look at it from multiple angles, and if we need to, we'll go after it from multiple angles. A few unique situations that I want to talk about. Some of these things, people want them to be codes issues, and sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. Wooded lots is a big one. I'm on the urban forestry implementation team, and people talk about, we need more urban forests. So wooden lots is not something that, if a lot is naturally overgrown, especially in commercial districts, you see that a lot, that they're just for sale, or they're just not, they're not manicured per se. Wooded lots is not something that codes typically will enforce, unless there's issues that are, dirty lots, if there's trash on them, things like that. Natural landscaping has become huge. We have never had more requests for this than ever. This was something that came up. A lot of people heard the no mow May. I wish that statement didn't exist, because that was brought over into this country in Wisconsin. I don't know if you think about it, but Wisconsin has a little bit different climate than we do here in Knoxville. So if somebody doesn't mow their yard in Knoxville till May, it's like taller than me. But we get a lot of requests for this natural landscaping. We actually worked with some people that know a lot more about it than me at UT, and developed an actual guideline for a natural landscape guideline. So it's on our website if anybody ever had any questions on how to do it. We have several links and things on our website that now discuss it. The biggest issue is, things like, we wanted to have a buffer zone. So those are two good examples. The top one is not a good example. I think they just got the sign, which you can get the sign for, I think, $35, and they threw the sign in their front yard and called it a day. That is a bad example of what would be natural landscaping, and the bottom is a really good example. So we look for things like, make sure there's a buffer zone between your property and your neighbors, no invasive species, and the biggest thing is no turf grass. That's what most of them will say about natural landscaping. Vacant houses is another one. It's not illegal to have a vacant house. Again, from a codes enforcement standpoint, we look at it from a safety and health. So the house has to be boarded, it has to be structurally sound. You can't have anybody getting into it, tearing out the doors, windows, that type. But typically, a lot of times you'll see a house that's in progress, or, just in between owners. We obviously we have an eye on them, and we try to keep them moving. But a vacant house by itself, as long as it's structurally sound and secure, is not a codes violation. Incomplete projects, that's something that has also been coming up a lot lately. I'd say we all know a house. We're not going to talk about the specific house, but this is something that continues to come up a lot, and we are actually looking at our code. We've met with attorneys trying to figure out what more we can do. There is a couple things that we've identified through plans review. Things like the wrap on a house, for example, the manufacturer says it's not supposed to be on a home for more than 180 days. So those are some things that we've not looked at, but are things that we are going to look at in the future in order to address these houses that are kind of just in process of being built.
A couple questions for you.
Sure.
Councilwoman Ryder.
I just wanted, for clarity's purpose, for others who might be listening, I know you didn't mean it this way, but when you said vacant houses must be boarded, you meant secure or boarded.
Correct, yeah.
It's not
secured
to
or boarded.
correct you, it's for the listening public.
I understand,
Just
yes.
because something's vacant doesn't mean it has to be boarded. I can leave my home secure, doors locked and windows locked.
Correct,
and
yes.
move along down the road and go to another one. But it's when someone vandalizes, breaks something, or I remove a piece of it, I need to secure it so it's not an attractive nuisance.
You're
Okay.
exactly right. Yeah, if
Okay.
all the windows and doors are on it, of course, it doesn't need to
Okay,
be boarded.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I
Yes.
have one follow-up question using the example you gave about wrapping and how long that's allowed to be on a property. Is there a certain limitation on boarding, wood boarding that?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, as far as just boarding doors, or you're talking about,
Boarding windows, boarding doors?
Yeah, I
I think
think-
of a couple buildings on Gay Street, and I can think of a few properties in South Knoxville that have had boards on them for years.
I don't think that there's a number, but if they're dilapidated and falling, we can certainly have them redo it.
Yeah, they're not falling, it's just boarded up windows with big plywood for 3 and 4 years. There's no limitation on that?
No, as long as they're secured.
Okay. All right. Councilman Roberto.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I wanted to go back to something you hit on just a second ago when you were talking about, like, your first job is about education. And I think that's 100% right. You know, a lot of the discussion that we're going to have today is going to be about questions that council members have had and that we've probably worked with you and, you know, your team on. But I think you're exactly right that the first step is always going to be talking to somebody and saying, hey, you may not realize this, but that you know, you can't do whatever it is that's going on here, and let's help educate. I mean, I can think of times that I've seen like a little flyer be put out at a house or a series of houses where, you know, they've got their leaves in the street instead of on the road, on the side of the yard waiting to be picked up. And, well, you're not supposed to put it in the street, you're supposed to put it in the yard, and it's going to come pick it up. And the same with the brush and things like that. And so I think that's a good approach. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think out of context, you know, the way we're questioning you about this stuff it might not come off that way. But yes, you need to do it that way. I think job one is definitely education. So the thing I was going to ask about the incomplete projects and the vacant house piece is along the lines of, hey, you know, let's look at what's going on with the amount of time the wrapping is supposed to be out and exposed. And if you've exceeded that, then, you know, we may have a problem. Can you talk to us about kind of your thoughts on what can happen when a project seems to not really be happening, but yet has received a permit? And is there anything that, you know, you're working on with your team about how to address that type of an issue as we go forward?
Yeah, so there's been specific cases. I'll jump in here. You can jump in if you have something else with plans review. I mean, typically, and Brian maybe could speak to this too, but when you have a permit, you know, it's good for a year. There's certain times where we've issued permits that I won't say have stricter deadlines, but where we need to see progress, and especially when codes gets involved, if we give them, you know, a 90-day repair order, for example, you know, we work with that homeowner as long as they're making progress. If that 90 days turns into 120, 150, whatever, as long as they are continuing to make progress, we continue to work with that property owner. So yes, I would say that we've been starting to work with permitting and trying to have better deadlines in these situations where, you know, people just get a permit and they don't do work.
And what you're talking about there is somebody who, for a variety of reasons, you know, had gotten a permit and then run into some hardships, and they were trying to do something. They were trying to progress the rebuild or whatever they were doing. And that's one thing where you're just checking in with them, making sure that things are moving along but what we're also talking about is something radically different than that, which is just getting a permit and then never doing anything ever with it. And so what you're talking about, I get a permit, but I'm actually not doing anything with the property for a long time. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and that again, we've had meetings, again, working lately because of a couple issues that have come up on how we can better address these and looking at more of the property maintenance code. You know, it's a big book. Our code only mentions certain things, but we have the right to use things that are in the property maintenance code that we are looking into and enforcing those in a different way than we have in the past.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add that if a property's troubled and we instruct them to go get a permit, so the public hearing officer will issue an order, a 90-day order, 120-day, 60-day order. One of the first things that he says is getting a permit does not absolve you for this. So it doesn't buy you a year. You can't go get a permit and say, no one's going to come see me for a year. So if we see nothing going on and those 90 days pass, we're back on them again. And we'll work with plans review, maybe have them pull the permit if that's appropriate, and then proceed with the condemnation. So there are things we can do, so.
I would add, there's other tools we have, as Chad mentioned, being more comprehensive. So in particular instances, if you've got a project that's kind of stalled out in perpetuity, there's neighborhood code enforcement, there's our permitting process, there's stormwater engineering violations. Actually, those carry heftier fines, actually, as authorized by the state. So this is part of our approach of being, hey, let's be on these, I will say these are mostly outlier issues. They're not, the everyday stuff is, the homeowners or the property owner usually brings it into compliance themselves. But for these outlier cases that are higher profile, obviously get more attention because they're just egregious, we need to be more comprehensive in our approach and using multiple tools at the same time to address that property and bring it back into compliance and be a little more proactive.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Thank you, and I appreciate what you're saying. And I've heard about problem properties like this for the almost 6 years I've been on council, and it can be anywhere, and people do fall on hard times, and so I appreciate that, but also appreciate the heightened emphasis on nipping things in the bud that are just seem to be taking advantage of people's kindness. And by the time you hear about it from me, that's because a neighbor has watched it so long and they have dealt with it the best way they can. And I think that's why we're having these because by the time I don't ever have anybody call me 6 months in or even a year in. It's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and people go, what is going on? And so I guess this is, I'm preaching, sorry, but a little bit of my question, and this is a question I hear a lot from people, is, well, how much are the fines if you keep violating all these notices and issues? And I understand if people don't have money, they don't have money, but I get the sense from some citizens I hear from, they don't think that's always the case. It's just that the fine is not sufficient enough to deter the behavior. And I'm sure there's some state law regulated about it, but I just, I'm kind of saying this publicly because I want people to understand there's only so much I believe we can do in terms of finding someone into compliance.
Chad, if you
Yeah.
could maybe answer that in the, I think there's a slide later about the process and when
Yes.
people get notified and what happens on each, if we can maybe keep moving, but there's an answer. Councilwoman Fugit has either looked ahead quite a bit or just has really strong instincts about what's happening next. I don't know what it is.
No, I have really strong, I have no strong instincts.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
something I have, apparently I've heard a lot about it over 6 years, and so I feel
Yeah.
quite
No,
passionate
yeah.
about it, so thank you.
Yeah, there's a slide for this, I think, later on.
Yeah, I mean,
All
just to kind of reiterate to what Grant said, I mean, the fortunate thing is these don't happen very often. I mean,
Yes.
one of the reasons, I mean, typically when you're building a house, you don't want it to
No,
take 4 or
no,
5 years,
no.
right? So
So-
that's why we're almost having to look at this, not for the first time, but it's becoming
Case by
more of an
case,
issue
yeah.
for whatever reason. So, but I will also add, I mean, I can say that real quick. We are limited by state law to $50 a day for most zoning and codes violations.
Okay.
So now that can add up, of course, if you're multiple days, but as Grant mentioned too, engineering is who has the kind of bigger teeth with NOVs and,
All right, I will be quiet and let you do your presentation.
yeah.
I think that's what the vice mayor was saying nicely to me.
These are good questions. Mr. Frost?
Well,
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
sorry, go for it.
I'll just add that for structures, we have a lane process. So if we board, we charge, and our fees are pretty steep, and they can build up in interest and penalties. So that's really code's hammer, if you will. Zoning has the $50 a day. We have that option, but lanes seem to work better for structural property. So That's our enforcement tool, our main
You
enforcement
said, but
tool.
what seems to work better?
Liens,
Liens, thank you.
liens on the property,
All right.
sorry.
Mr. Frost?
Thank you. Briefly, as Mr. Weth and Mr. Elder just referenced the $50 cap, I'm guessing 15, 20 years ago, there was a statewide effort to amend the state constitution because that cap is in the Constitution. Tennessee Municipal League got behind it. There was an advertising campaign that showed falling down house after falling down house, and it did not pass, did not even come close.
On that note,
On that note, this is just some of our data. This is just from this year. So from January 1 to July 21, just the number of complaints. They are sorted in order of, most complaints to least. Dirty and overgrown lots, obviously, is the biggest one. That's all summer long. We get the dirty and overgrown lots. Solid waste, abandoned and inoperable vehicles. Unfortunately, I'd love to know how many of those 291 are on public property versus private property, but right now they're all grouped in together. It's something else we've talked to our IT department about is making sure we have, things separated out and we get all the good data that we need. It's also important to remember that, one complaint may take multiple inspections. So our team may go visit a house and then say, hey, we'll revisit this in 10 days if it's a dirty lot. A lot of times the property owner will say, I just need 2 more days. So we'll say, okay, we'll give you 2 more days. We'll go back out. So that's why the inspection numbers are typically much higher than just the complaint numbers. So one property, especially if it's a structure violation, may take multiple inspections to get to the end goal that we're looking for.
I was surprised by the number of citations issued so far this year.
So just going to talk about zoning. That is just for zoning. So zoning complaints, as you can see, there was 491 complaints. It is not uncommon for us to issue multiple NOVs. So typically they'll issue 2 or 3 NOVs before they ever get to the number, a true citation being issued. And most of the time, fortunately, those take care of the problem.
But 0 citations issued this year.
Yep, that would be if you have any questions, Barry could answer that. Yeah.
Okay. Still perplexed. Can you,
So I can-
9,000 inspections and 0 citations issued. Help me with that.
1,000 inspections?
9,100,
That's just zoning is
That's-
491 and 511. So.
Yes.
The citations is just for zoning, related to zoning.
So out of
Okay, so-
almost
So
500.
so we've had, 511 inspections for zoning complaints.
all right,
and we've-
understood, okay.
We haven't
I
issued.
thought it was the total, all right.
No, we
How many
issued-
citations have we, sorry.
We issued, sure.
I understand now. How many citations were issued for the items of above zoning?
Well, they're not citations, so those are citations to court. That's zoning's tool, so they'll actually, it's associated with the use, so they'll get their lawyer and they'll go to municipal court. Ours are, we'll just perform the service. Our public service crews will mow it, that we will clean your yard, we will board it for you, we will demolish it, and we will send you an invoice.
Okay.
And interest and penalties accrue very quickly, and
So I guess
that's,
I'm just curious about how many invoices or how many times have you issued fees in the shape of invoices? I mean, we see the number, the reason I ask is because one of the questions I always get is, how much are they getting fined? Did they get fined? How much was it? Are they getting fined yet? When does that start? How many of it? This is just the volume of,
Yeah, this one's just the
Noise.
volume of calls.
Yeah.
We can get you that number. I don't have it off the top of my head
Okay.
exactly how many, but
I'm
like
just
I can tell
generally
you, we
curious, is it
have.
1%? Is it 50%? Again, don't guess now, but I'd be curious to
Thank you.
know how many people actually end up with an invoice or a citation. Sorry, Mr. Barry, to burst your, where did he go?
He's
Oh, there
right
you
here.
are.
You're good.
If you want to answer, please do. I interrupted you. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
So yes, as Chad talked about, typically we issue multiple NOVs before we get to a citation. To give you an example, in 2004, or in 2024, excuse me, we issued 4 citations. Those were related to some properties that you may be familiar with. Liquid Environmental Solutions was one. We had Fort Loudon Waste was one. We have a gentleman that owns multiple properties that was running a tow business on a property that was not zoned for that. Another one was a property off of Coker Avenue. So we do issue citations, but we issue multiple NOVs. Typically, when a citation is issued, it ends up going to circuit court. And a lot of times the judge will determine based on whenever it could be the first NOV was issued, or the second NOV was issued, or when the citation was, as far as when the $50 a day citation could start from, as far as what the
Okay. But one of that I would be familiar with is pouring concrete too early in the morning or working too late at night beyond construction hours. Those would be in the 511 and the 95 that never end up in a citation, right?
Right, so those aren't zoning, that's building related, building
Okay.
department, and
All right.
those aren't listed in the zoning.
Okay. Councilman Roberto.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So it looks like we've got about, 7 months of data from 2025 up there. My question is are these typical numbers? Are you seeing trends of this violation we see more often and it's rising, or these things are coming down? Can you talk to us a little about trends?
Yeah, I think, as you can tell, at the bottom, we did about 18,000 codes inspections. Again, that's not the zoning issues, that's just code. So we're right on par with that again this year. We've done 9,117, so multiply that by 2, we'd be about there again. I think the biggest thing we've seen is, I made a point to say we've only done 14 demolitions, and 4 of those were accessory structures. So the biggest thing that we're seeing, which is a good thing, is these houses aren't being demolished. They are being reinvested, and they are turning around. It's bad, not a bad example, but in 2010, I was here when the housing market was bad, and I think we did about 130 demolitions that year, and we've done 14. So I think something to be said by that is, I know that's a number that has gone way down. It's been going down for the last few years, which tells me that most of these houses are being turned over by investors and redone.
And I think that's great, and I appreciate you highlighting that.
Yeah.
There's 3,200 dirty lot, overgrown lots. Is that pretty typical for a 7-month period?
Yeah, I think that's been pretty typical. Those numbers haven't really changed much. Again, those unique outliers of, I'm not mowing this month, those have definitely kind of grown a little bit, but those still, overall, these numbers are very typical.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So now we get into zoning enforcement just a little bit. So this is leaving the codes world and going to more Brian Berry and Peter's team. These are typical zoning violations that you see. The top 2 are what we see the most majority of, which is prohibited uses within a zone. That means like somebody's using a residential area for commercial use, or there's no permits to establish a use on a property. There's been some great examples of that lately. Codes, I met on a property with Codes and Brian's team and KFD and KPD. And that again, I will speak to, we are doing more of that than ever as to working kind of cross-department on some of these properties. Front yard parking, always another big one. This is really just parking on grass or parking in unpermitted driveways. Going down a little bit more, storage, parking of trailers or recreational vehicles. Obviously, living in recreational vehicles is a big one. And just over parking. So, parking in areas that would exceed the number of vehicles that you should have on a driveway. Performing unpermitted work. That can be anything from like your setbacks or the features of an accessory structure, building fences that are too tall, turning garages into like ADUs, accessory dwelling units, unpermitted carports, things of that nature. And then last would be illegal signs. And again, I'll say that's another area where public service kind of has a role, codes has a role, and then so does zoning enforcement. We all 3 kind of tag team to tackle illegal signs.
Just on the last one and related to litter, the county has an environmental officer. Do you all, is it just whoever takes the call goes and gets, litter on the side of the road, whether it's the city or I would reach out to Carson Daly and for the county issues, and he'd go to the environment,
Yeah, so litter on the roadways is typically handled by our public service department. Most of those calls will go to them. They have either their own crews that do it, or we work with some community services and keep Knoxville beautiful, if it's volunteer efforts, or we have adult and juvenile community service that still will do some litter collection.
Okay.
But those complaints will typically go to Rachel in the Public Service Department.
Okay. Councilman Roberto.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So you talked about exceeding the number of vehicles that were allowed. So I wanted to kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier. Is there a number of vehicles that you would know on your driveway, you filled the whole thing up with cars and everything, or is there a number that you're limited to?
You want to answer? Oh, when I say that, I mean like, if you're overflowing your driveway and they're parking in the yard or on the side of the yard, I don't think there's an exact number, but I'll let Brian answer that further.
Sure, the zoning code says for single-family and two-family dwellings, parking's prohibited in the front and corner side yard, except on approved driveways and in approved parking spaces. So if you have a driveway that will accommodate 6, 8 cars, as long as they're on an approved parking space, we don't regulate.
Well, I just want to clarify that because that's one we hear about. And then going back to what I was asking about earlier with the commercial vehicles. So is there something about commercial vehicles that we can tell the public about with regard to parking at residential areas?
Typically, we will look at what commercial vehicles, if they're running a business out of the residence. That's most of the time where we start in trying to determine that. But that's generally where we begin with that.
Okay, so you would have to just send an inspector out and see what was going on there.
Correct.
To figure that out. And I guess the same thing would be with regard to, construction vehicles or things like that that are being used in just kind of sitting there in a residential area. That would be something an inspector would come out and look at.
That's correct. There's language in the zoning code about storage and parking of trailers, recreational vehicles, and commercial vehicles. And they have limitations on what you can have as far as a residence.
Okay, thank you.
Bulldozers.
Councilwoman McKenzie.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I thought you were ignoring me for a moment, but I see that Mr. Johnson
We had a
set me
technical
up over
difficulty.
here.
I'm sorry.
No worries at all. Actually, I had my light on under codes, but let me ask a quick question while we're on zoning. So the parking in front yards, is that something that typically we would not address unless it's called in? Or is it something if you all just happen to be in a neighborhood and you notice that there are a lot of cars parked in the front yard? Or does a call or a complaint precipitate us to go out and investigate it?
Yes, it's primarily based on a call or complaint that comes in from 311, or if something has been noticed and as far as that goes, and then they reach out and notify staff. So those can be phone calls, emails, and oftentimes 311 as well.
So, in regard to that, a lot of times we have a lot of rental properties where there's a renter who is the person who is violating these things, right? If they are not responsive, when do we engage with the homeowner, the property owner?
Well, we would talk with whoever is the residence there at the
First.
time.
Mhm.
Correct. And then if that doesn't, result in what we're trying to accomplish, then we may ask and try to reach out to whoever the owner is and try to find contact information for them.
Is there a certain, if you all have run into this situation before, is there a certain timeline? Say, if there's an absentee property owner that maybe doesn't even reside in the state anymore, do we give them 3 months, 6 months, or is there any type of policy around or procedure around that?
It's on a case-by-case basis, so that goes back to the nature of the NOV. So typically, we'll reach out if it's someone who's renting, we'll notify them. If they continue to do that, then perhaps we'll start to issue NOVs, notice of violations, to the actual property owner for them to take care of it or to notify their renter that it needs to be corrected. And then, of course, that can continue to lead towards citations.
And also, is there a breakdown by district of the violations? Do you guys track that? Is that available?
It is. I don't have that on me, but yeah, we
Right.
could get that to you.
Okay,
Sure.
yes, if you could make a note, I'd love to have that for my
Okay.
district. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I might add, when our folks get out, if we're out there for a codes issue and we see a zoning violation, I instruct my folks to turn that in over to Brian's group. So we're not going to ignore it. So if we're out there for one thing, a lot of times we'll find that, if they're a bad actor on mowing the grass, they're probably a bad actor on parking and maybe some other things. So we do a comprehensive inspection. We do what's in our wheelhouse, and then we send things over to Brian when it's appropriate.
That's good to know, and I think what I've noticed a lot of times is usually it's kind of the same offenders that you have to keep going back to a lot of times, so, but thank you for sharing that.
Councilwoman Helsley.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, parking in front yards. Just one question. Is that enforceable via fines or not? I know it wasn't originally, and I should have mentioned that now, but I don't.
Sure, it still goes back to the issuing of a notice of violations that end up towards a citation and ends
So
up at the circuit
ultimately, they
court.
do get one?
They can. So oftentimes the process is we have a conversation and let the individuals know and understand what the code says, and to help them know, because sometimes people just don't know. And we would rather just have a conversation. We'll do a follow-up, and in the follow-up, if it's not taken care of, then we'll issue a notice of violation, and then you can issue multiple notice of violations as long as the problem doesn't get corrected, ending up in a citation and going to court. So,
Okay, well, originally, there wasn't a fine attached to that when it passed years ago. But anyway, so if there is now, that's fine. I mean, I live south of the river, so that's kind of a pretty common occurrence, but I was wondering about the fine factor, so thank you so much.
Councilman Roberto, you asked about trends. Will add this. We are seeing a lot of, people are having roommate situations a lot more maybe than they used to, right? Times are tough, housings are tough, so we're seeing more cars in driveways, so we are seeing a lot more of that. So when you do see these extra cars in driveways, full driveways, we're seeing a lot more people moving in together and sharing rent and just trying to make it. So we do see a lot more of that. So that, just addressing your trend comment.
Okay, so the process, this speaks to Councilwoman Fugit's question. So just as an example, dirty or overgrown lots, we are required, same with zoning rules, to give the owner time to correct the issue, right? Again, our hope is that we go out and we educate and then they fix it. But this is typical for dirty overgrown lots. It's 10 days. So we will issue a citation or issue a notice of violation to them, and they have 10 days to correct the problem. We have great software now that it just automatically schedules a reinspection date. Typically, that's 12 days, usually because of weekends. We go out and reinspect. Hopefully, it's taken care of. At that point, that case would be closed. If not, then it would be sent to, for example, in an overgrown lot. That's where we would then create a work order. It would come down to Rachel's team in the Public Service Department, and they would go out and mow that. So that's typically our process of how those things work. These are kind of our average time. So for a codes complaint, we're usually within 2 days. We're visiting that property to see what the complaint is. Zoning's about 4 days. The average time to close it, if it is complied with. So the owner would have 10 days on, and that's really speaking to the dirty and overgrown lots or just any zoning complaint or inspection. It's around 17 days. So if you think of somebody calling it in, we issue the letter that the lot's overgrown, we go out and reinspect it. Typically, it's closed within 17 days. If it comes down to our department for a work order, we're averaging 25 days. That's actually a really quick turnaround. There's some things that we've done in public service over the years to increase that. I would say if it's a overgrown lot, our zone crews are doing that, and Rachel will tell you they hate having work orders, so they get them knocked out really quick. For an overgrown lot, we're probably getting those knocked out around 19 to 20 days. The dirty lots take a little bit more time just because there's only one crew, but they're probably on average about 29 to 30 days. I wish that was another thing that we separated out that we were talking to our IT team about. But on average, it's a really quick turnaround for initial inspection. Also, always encourage people to call 311. There's my 311 plug for Russ and Carter, because that really starts the timeline. So we can measure how long it takes us and really to see if we're doing a good job or not. So That's the initial complaint on like a structure violation. Obviously, those can be different depending on the nature of a structure violation. We may give 30, 60, 90, even 120 days if it's pretty severe. If that one is not taken care of with a structure violation, or if it's worse, we take it to what we call the public officer, and they can actually put further stipulations on the house, to condemnation, to demolition, to things of that nature. So structure violations can be a little bit trickier just because of the nature of them, but that's kind of the enforcement process with those things. And then, as Brian mentioned, we will typically issue NOVs for zoning inspections, and then sometimes we'll issue multiple NOVs before that leads to citations. So did that answer your question, or is there any more questions about kind of the enforcement side? All right. Moving on then.
I just have one more question.
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
for Mr. Jensen or Mr. Hall. What is the follow-up with the person who initiates the request? That's the thing that
Well,
seems probably hardest to automate, or to, if I call in or send a message on 311 or use the My Knoxville app, I don't really know what the conclusion was.
I mean, if it comes to a
Unless I see
codes officer.
A car towed,
Yeah.
or a lot mowed or something, I don't know.
I will answer quickly. If it comes to a codes officer, they don't really even have office phones. Most of them now use their cell phones as so if the letter comes to them, it will usually have their code's name on it. They will typically address the complaint if there's a contact person on the 311 call. So if they leave a 311, if at 311 they leave a name, our codes officers are really good about contacting them. But I'll let Carter answer for other 311 complaints.
Yeah, so with any service request that's called into 311, and this isn't just codes enforcement, this is, calling in a pothole, or you have bulky waste, any caller, or through any of the other digital channels that we have, the app, the chat bot, online form, every single service request is provided with a service request number. If you're providing a phone number or an email, you're also going to have that provided to your email or your phone. You can always call back into 311 and provide that service request number, and we'll be able to give you an update on what's happened with it. We also have an online portal where you can type in the service request number, and you can see the workflow history that's gone along with that. We don't currently do any proactive caller feedback, honestly, because we're already answering a lot of incoming calls, but we are looking at ways that we can do more proactive follow-up.
There's a lot of good, easy to use software platforms that the city could take advantage of that would do automated updates to whomever. If I called in and gave my phone number, I gave my email address, I would be asked, would you like to receive updates on this? And that way, nobody has to call back 311. 311 doesn't have to call back. The codes officer doesn't have to call anybody. I think that's a worthy investment, because a lot of times I get calls about, hey, I submitted this, and then I have to go to the link that you referred to that I forget that Councilwoman Ryder reminds me of every month, and then I have to look it up and call it. So there's a lot of 4 or 5 kind of reactive things that happen without those updates. So if we could automate that, I think that's a worthy investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are actually actively looking at ways to have that automated follow-up. You have to measure it against, oftentimes with codes enforcement issues, people don't want to provide contact information. So we're trying to kind of figure out ways to have best of both worlds there.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Ryder.
Yeah, can I just comment on the link for Knoxville Work Search? Isn't that what it's called? It's not the easiest thing to find. It's kind of buried. I don't know if that's something that we can improve, because I do refer sometimes constituents, candidates, other people, other council members. I don't think anybody else on council knew about it. I am, of course, a database nerd, so I love to look through it, and I look at all of you guys' notes. Anytime I call something in for somebody, or somebody calls me about a property, I look there first before I call you guys, and that way I have a little bit of background. And like if it says that something is inspected and no violation or complete, then that's when I follow up and say, hey, the item is still there, dumpster's still on the sidewalk, or whatever the issue is. then I follow up on it. But anyway, I just think we could maybe make things better by making that more accessible. I bookmarked it for myself because I got tired of hunting for it, and I could never find it. The pathway is not terribly obvious. So, thanks.
I'll just add, I totally agree with Vice Mayor Smith and Councilwoman Ryder. And we are working on, better workflows and making it automated to where folks get a follow-up. I've tested out myself and made those similar comments to our team about receiving follow-up information on a request. We have budgeted and you all have approved a new website for the city, and I think that's going to help us, help us modernize a lot of our customer-facing software and links and access to those services. So I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this one? All right, so now I kept trying to think of good segues between codes and zoning and short-term rental. So I guess you could have a codes violation at a short-term rental. How's that? That good? So short-term rentals, we're going to switch hats a little bit and talk about that. Short-term rental is defined as a property or portion that is rented for less than 30 days at a time. So these are the two basic types of permits, and that is all based on how the property is zoned. So you have a Type 1 operating permit, which is an owner occupied in a residential zone, and a Type 2 permit, which is a non-owner occupied in a non-residential zone. And you can see they're almost dead even on the number that we have in the city, 203 to 197. Flip to the next one. So how an applicant established residency is detailed in our short-term rental ordinance. This is required for a Type 1 permit. It's at least two of the following listed, listing the address of the short-term rental in the document. So these are vehicle registration, valid driver's license, children's school registration, voter registration card, or a W-2. And then you get into the process for non-compliant properties. So the city contracts with Host Compliance for help monitor all short-term rental platforms like your Airbnbs and VRBOs and those things to identify the properties that do not have a permit. So that is what this is trying to address. This chart follows the steps to address the properties that do not have a permit. So it takes 3 notifications, and after that, if they are still non-compliant, then a citation is issued. You can see in the bottom left, we haven't issued any citations since January of '24, but there's been several notices that have been issued. Typically, these things take care of themselves in one way or another. Either somebody decides they don't want a short-term rental anymore and they rent it out long-term, or they just close up the short-term rental. So, yeah, any questions on the process?
Councilwoman Fugit.
Thank you. This is a question that I know has been asked and answered, and I'm not sure I really understand the process or the way it really works. I can't speak this afternoon. You have to verify all that when you get one. What about, I think we ought to talk about how long those permits are good for. Then how do you verify again if people are still living there? Because the biggest complaint we hear is, yes, somebody got it, they don't live there anymore, then it basically got sold to an investor who still runs it as an Airbnb, but it's permitted. Does that make, you understand my, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So after the initial application goes through the process and is approved, there's an annual renewal. And that came about a couple of years ago as a follow-up to a request from this body to do annual renewals. So we do an annual renewal of the application, the entire application, including the affidavit, and it does also have a renewal fee of $50 for them to renew. And so they do have to reprovide, reprovide might be not the right word in the example that you gave, but provide documentation, for example, of residency when they send in their renewal. They have to do that again.
But from what you're telling me then, every year, that has to be renewed.
Correct.
So, yes, it can happen in the middle of a cycle.
Correct.
But it should be caught.
When the renewal
When the
comes up.
renewal comes again. And thank you for that, because I think that is really what we were getting at when we wanted that done. And that's part of why I think we all wanted to talk about this, because people did complain, council did something, the city's done something. That should not be happening as much as I think we used to hear it happen. Should be, is always the opposite word. There are always things that slide through, but I think then if something slides through, again, do people reach out to 311, make the complaint, and that gets looked at? I think that's really the process, because then I sometimes hear, well, it may have gotten renewed, but it's not, and
Well, the complaint
they're
process.
wild parties. It's basically, people don't really care unless they're wild parties.
So the complaint process, it does happen that multiple of us on city staff, including Donna's team, get calls or emails, but we do, through host compliance that does the monitoring for us, have a 24/7, 365 hotline. That number is 865-337-8275. It is located on the short-term rental website, webpage on the city's website. That is a number that can be called with a particular complaint about a similar situation that you described, and our team can go through the process of verification again.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, I wanted to kind of talk about an issue that happened. Now, this happened about 3 or 4 years ago, but I want to tell this story because I think it highlights the importance of enforcing the owner-occupied requirements in a residential zone. And hopefully some of this has been cured, and then I'll have a question afterward. But this happened in Norwood about 3 years ago, and the neighbors knew that the owner was not living there. And they went to different lengths to find the owner and to verify that, and the owner was living in California. And they made complaints to codes at that time, and nothing was ever done. And then they noticed all this traffic that was coming out of this short-term rental, and it was obvious to them that drugs were being sold out of there. And they again made complaints, and this went on for about 1.5 years, and nothing, was done about it. It got so bad that what ended it was the TBI actually raided this house. This is all documented. This is not speculation or fears from some neighbor. So, and it was the gang from Detroit that had kind of run a pipeline to Knoxville. 4 people were arrested from Detroit, 1 a local who was the lookout. So I'm just kind of getting into the specifics of it just to kind of make it a little bit more real. This is things that can happen if these owner-occupied requirements are not enforced. So as I mentioned, this was an earlier timeline. Hopefully we've done things that something like this won't fall through the cracks. But I just wanted to underline that. And I guess the question is like, if a owner basically commits fraud when he's doing these applications, how can you check that? And is there ramifications for fines or punishment if you know that they've committed fraud? I guess, generally tell me if there's some kind of enforcement there if you have evidence that a person is not living on the residence and has basically lied on his application.
That gets tough for a whole host of reasons, and Cheryl is not an attorney and does not play one on TV, so I want to be very clear about that. It gets very hard because if they have provided the documentation, they've provided, as long as the documentation that they have provided is current, it's not, for example, an expired driver's license, it has to be a current driver's license. As long as the items that they have provided are current. We did, a couple of years ago, when we did a workshop on this at your all's request, and Vice Mayor, at the time, Roberto was interested in us including an affidavit in the application, which we did do. And that is a part of the renewal every single year. So they are attesting to the fact that this is their primary residence. We know that there are folks who probably it is not their primary residence. And it's just a very hard thing for us to prove, because the proof piece is what gets truly difficult to establish.
I do understand the difficulty. So I take it, though, that even though they're asked to sign an affidavit, there's no real penalty. Can we take them to court anywhere, or can we prosecute them? Any way you know of that, other than just them basically, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Is there any conduct that is punishable there, or any way of punishing that conduct?
Related to that conduct specifically, I think, do you have a response? We have our MTAS expert, Ms. Stephanie here, who can potentially provide, who is a legal authority versus the fact that I am not. Let her.
Thank you. Again, I'm Stephanie O'Hara, and I'm a legal consultant with MTAS. I've spoken to you all before. I think that would require, residency is just a really hard thing to prove. I mean, you've probably seen in people elected to office who've allegedly moved from their house, and trying to establish that residency is very difficult, and there's a totality of the circumstances. So based on how the wording is, I need to read the code, your actual code language, but it says it's established by these documents. If they submitted fraudulent documents and you could somehow prove that, I think you could maybe file suit and get an injunction or a declaratory judgment that that they did not actually establish residency, but outside filing a lawsuit, you could not revoke it unless I think some due process was involved.
Okay. At this stage, does it just boil down basically to pulling their permit? If you got some kind of indication that, but I don't know if you can do that if they're submitting what appears to be valid documents to you.
Right,
yearly.
so there's only revocation if they have
Right.
3 violations, but if you were going to prove that they got the permit under false pretenses, I think that would involve the lawsuit. And you'd have
Okay.
to prove that they did not have the right to get a permit because they provided falsified documentation, and prove that in court through a judgment action or something along those lines. And a court would have to say that they were not entitled to the permit, but the city could not just say, we are revoking your permit because of this, because the statute preempts that.
Okay, thank you. I knew that was a tough question.
State statute, state law preempts that.
I knew that was a tough question when I asked it, but, again, I just wanted to highlight, the possible things that can go wrong if owners, this requirement is not enforced to the best of our ability. But you've given me a really good idea of kind of where we are on that and the difficulties, so thank you.
Councilman Roberto.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. My first question is to Ms. O'Hara. The lawsuit you were talking about, where would that action take place?
I think Chancery, they would
So
have jurisdiction,
It would be
probably.
a Chancery court action? Okay.
Yeah, I think, I've looked this up for other actions about declaratory judgment. I think it would be best filed in Chancery, probably.
Okay, and would that be the neighbors making that lawsuit, or would that be the city?
The city is the one that issues the permit. So in this case, it would be if you got proof that the documentation they provided was falsified, then you'd have to make a judgment, or your city attorney's office would need to make a judgment call of whether you were going to file suit on that and get a declaratory judgment that they falsified documents in order to receive a permit. But I don't think there would be necessarily cause of action by neighbors on that as well. They would just need to bring it to the city because the city is the one that issued the permit in that case.
Okay. And with regard to the affidavits, which I think was a really good step, and I really appreciate you all implementing that after the workshop a couple years back. If there was a false statement made on the affidavit, would that also, could that also lead to moving into Chancery Court if people wanted to do that?
You mean by the city?
Yeah.
I would think, I mean, if there's by penalty of perjury, I would have to look into that a little bit more. But I would think that would give you one more proof that they certified that these documents proved their residency.
Okay. So this is important, I think, because the enforcement side of the short-term rentals is something that I think all council members hear about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think there were some really important and constructive changes that we did, a couple of years back, and the affidavits being one of them. But these questions still remain because just like my colleague was saying, you'll have folks say, I live next to this, and I know that these folks have not lived there in a long time. And you'll see even, I've seen it before where on the listing, it'll say, this is a great house we used to live in until we moved to California, and this is a great place to stay if you're visiting Knoxville. Okay, it's pretty obvious that you just said you don't live here, right?
Yeah.
So those are, like my colleague was saying, those are examples that we hear. So I think the enforcement piece is something that we hear about all the time, and I know you all do as well. So I'm glad we're talking about that. The other question I had, and this might be more, just kind of big picture, there were about 200 type 1s and type 2s. How are those changing? Are they going up? Are they going down? And this becomes a piece that people are interested in also because, when you turn something into a short-term rental, it's not a rental for a family that's, looking for a house. It's not a place somebody can live. It's more like a vacation, and more like a hotel, I guess, if you think about it. But that's why a reason, with the supply challenges that we have with housing right now, that becomes very top of mind too. So I'm just curious about how the numbers you're seeing fluctuate. Thank you.
So the numbers from 2 years ago when we did this workshop for you all have gone down by about 40 or so total permits. So it has decreased slightly since about 2 years ago. I think that, we're being as diligent as we can be on our follow-up, the renewal process, the recurring affidavit and recurring document submission has probably caused a few folks to decide maybe this could be a different kind of property instead of a short-term rental. That's supposition on my part, but there has been a change of about 40 or so over 2 years.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yeah, I appreciate my colleagues' comments also. I just really wanted, I guess, to emphasize, my purpose of the question really was I knew kind of what the problems were with enforcement and validation of paperwork and all that, but I just wanted to kind of raise it, I guess, up on the radar screen. And I think this is something we should continue to keep looking at and kind of see what our options are as far as either enforcing fraud or discouraging people from doing it. And as I think was kind of mentioned, is like just the fact of an affidavit and the recurring requirement that once a year they have to do that may have discouraged some people from taking it so lightly, which a lot of the neighbors were basically, they were saying, look, people aren't paying any attention to this. They know it's not being enforced. I don't think that's as true now as it was. But anyway, just to, I probably said more than I need to, just to emphasize the point. But let's continue to look at this enforcement part and how we can prevent people from not living where they're submitting paperwork that they are. So thank you.
Actually, Stephanie covered most of this
Yeah.
particular
I was
slide for
yeah,
us.
I was
so-
going to say this slide has pretty much been covered with your questions, but I think the biggest thing is that the state law that went into effect in January 19 preempts the city ordinance. I mean, if there's any other questions on this one, but yeah, I think Stephanie pretty much covered that one. That's why we flipped to this one mid-question. So any more questions about short-term rentals? Okay. So if you need to get to your short-term rental, you might get there with a scooter. All right, so that was about the only segue I could possibly think of on that one. So switching hats one last time to talk about scooters. And so this is, we have two operators in the city of Knoxville. They are Bird and Lime. The black dots are Bird and the green dots are Lime. Operating hours for the scooters are 7 to 12. Of course, UT game days, there's a no ride policy from 11 p.m. on Friday to 7 a.m. on Sunday. Those are some stats about the first half of 2025, 90,000 trips, 85,000 miles roughly, and a little under a mile was the average distance per ride. Both of those have operating agreements, and at this point, there's not been any violations with them.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Okay, I'm probably anticipating a slide, Chad.
Well,
So-
I could go through that one real quick, or
So-
go ahead.
So,
Yeah.
no, my question's not answered up there.
Okay.
So when people don't do what they're supposed to do with them, not the provider, like people leave them all over the place, they're not supposed to leave them. I still hear those things. I see them. And they get picked up at night. And people still ride them illegally. So how much enforcement is with the scooter company on their riders that leave things around? I think, maybe that is in your thing?
Yeah, so-
That is in your slide. Well,
Yeah.
get to it then.
So the next slide, and John Livingood's here if you have any other questions, but that is coming. They're doing more of that now, and more is coming. So they introduced an AI parking review in July. So this is kind of an example of this screen. So if somebody tried to end their scooter ride and leave the scooter right there, it won't let them. It will say you can't park your scooter on the sidewalk. Try again. You have to go park this in a different location. So there is becoming more enforcement with the programs through the app and through the user. Again, there's in-app pop-ups, email, social media posts to remind him now of proper parking. And again, now it will not let, at least on Lime, I think Birds is coming, but it won't let them in their ride if they have improperly parked the scooter.
So will it not let them ride in places they're not allowed to ride?
I know they have geofences on them. So yes, it would shut off if they are taking into one of those areas that are geofenced and they're not allowed to ride. Yeah.
And for the record again, where are they to ride in the streets, to not ride in the streets? Are they to ride on the sidewalks, not ride on the sidewalks? I mean,
They're supposed to ride on the street.
okay, so if
Yes.
it could detect that they were on a sidewalk, would it turn it off?
In theory, I think the answer is yes. I know sometimes those geofences aren't quite that accurate.
Can it take a picture of them when they're driving? I'm just teasing. These are the real things I hear from people who live and work in places where where they need to use the sidewalk, and people go zipping by, breaking the rule, and making it hard for people who have not even mobility issues, just regular plain old pedestrians trying to walk down the street. So those are the things that I still hear. I don't hear as much rampant hatred as I did a couple of years ago, because at least they're not being left out all over town overnight, which was one of the problems that we used to hear. But it's still the user being the problem, not so much the company. So I guess I'm just, again, like Councilman Thomas, making the point over and over and over that until the scooter company can do things that helps control the behavior of the user, we're still gonna get lots of complaints. And, you know, I wasn't a fan to begin with, still not a fan. Everybody knows I'm not a fan. Apparently, every resident knows I'm not a fan because they tell me. But I mean, I just think, I'm just teasing. But but that's why. It really is the safety thing about people not using them appropriately that causes, like most of things. Most people don't have a problem with things if people play by the rules. So, so is AI, Vice Mayor, can AI fix that?
It can.
Is AI going to
We're
fix
working on it.
that?
I don't know. I do know as a user that if you're on the wrong road, it'll let you know and it'll shut off. I don't think it can tell just yet whether you're on the sidewalk versus the road. I think, just one plug, I think that there's a way to use these on football weekends in a safe way. I've said this for a few years now, and I still feel this way. You're taking thousands of cars off the parking lots and roads by doing so. You don't think we want them right down by the stadium, but people that live a few miles away that want to get close to walking distance, I think there's a way to do it. So I think this is still a miss for those days. Councilwoman Fugit. Oh,
I'm about to have a with you, and that has nothing to do with this.
fair enough. Okay.
Yep. Any other questions on scooters? No.
The corralling works great.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are rebalanced to downtown. I should have mentioned that.
They're
yeah,
not
rebalanced
scattered everywhere
downtown.
in the more. That's way much improved.
Yeah. Lastly, just want to mention, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but, you know, I've been here since 2009, and these first two subjects, I've not seen the city over those years work as well as we do now as far as the layered enforcement. We definitely are working closer with, you know, permitting, zoning, KPD, KFD, whatever it takes on some of these properties that are outlying really bad actors. I think a great example of that is the TLC zones. I know you all heard a little bit about that. The initial one that was at Chestnut and MLK, that one, I mean, police gets a lot of the credit for it, as rightfully they deserve. But you know, we also worked really closely with them in our codes enforcement. Jordan Hardy, who's actually was a former police officer, worked with them a lot in that area. And really, you know, it's broken windows theory. If there's crime, there's also probably other issues. And that it's just a good example of how I think several departments have worked together to really improve that area. We've done it in all the other TLC zones too, but some of those are more housing development, so it's a little bit different from a codes enforcement standpoint. Outside of that too, proactive versus reactive, something, you know, during COVID, we kind of got away from a little bit of the proactive, but I know Scott does a great job really trying to push our codes officers to be proactive. You know, if you're going out to see a dirty lot and you pass two others, you know, let's go ahead and get those while we're on the way. It definitely helps to be more efficient that way. And again, we shoot for that 60-40. I think we both love to see 65-35, but, you know, because there's always, you know, time-consuming things that when you're being reactive that take some time, but there's always the time also to get the more proactive side. So we're always really encouraging that. Data-driven enforcement, I think one thing our COO has pushed is that we have more data on issues. You all have asked some questions today that we need to pull the data on, and we need to get it for you. Our IT department has been working very hard on that. There is a really neat dashboard that they've been developing that is not quite ready for public consumption, but it's really neat. It basically can take like KPD data and overlay it with codes data or any other type of 311 complaint, and you can really see the issues. I mean, both positively and negatively, right? If there's a lot of crime and we can look at it from a code standpoint and we've not been addressing things like we should, then maybe we need to pay a closer attention to it. Or just, you know, areas where there's voids based on our 311 data and how we are enforcing or educating. Targeted code sweeps, that's just something else we've brought back. We did one, again, kind of following up on the TLC zone. I feel like that one was really done as a code sweep in connection with KPD, but we've also did one in I'm blanking, the Western Heights area right outside of like McSpadden and Oldham, Virginia. And again, there's a TLC zone right there, so we have tried to expand on those. And then finally, I do want to still mention addressing more vacant and abandoned properties. We have certainly been having a lot of meetings over the last couple of months as to how we can do that better, and we have some good tools, I think, going forward. Any questions?
Councilwoman Ryder.
Yeah, Mr. Weth, I'm not sure which position you were in. Were you with the city in 2005-ish, 6, 7?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I just remember, I'm pretty sure that what I'm about to bring up, I feel like that's how I met David Brace, or I remember
Okay.
having a conversation with him there. I maybe had already knew him, but anyway, well, it was 2007, so I can't remember if, to be honest, if it was an election year or if it was afterwards, but when Haslam was in office and we were new to town, and actually, so there were the Walk with the Mayor events where they coordinated with neighborhood groups and came out to the community, and we did these big walks in the neighborhood. Mr. Rosenberg, I don't know what year you moved in on Scott and if you were at that one, but my child was 4 months old, the one that's about to move out to college. And we had everybody in our front yard was the start point. We mapped out like a 1-mile route and all the like department heads and staff and lots of people. And they gave a lot of people in the neighborhood a chance to meet people and put faces to them and ask questions. I felt like it was a beneficial activity. And, you know, and then we were on the ground walking around, looking at specific things in the neighborhood that were concerns, sidewalks, trees, you know, infrastructure type things, and codes. So that's why I think Brace was over codes at the time, and I'm pretty sure that was the capacity in which he was talking to me. There was a sidewalk that needed to be redone and has since been redone. But anyway, I felt like as a community member, that was a very beneficial activity. And it brought everybody out, and a lot of people got to ask questions. So I just, again, make that recommendation as well. Would be interested in scheduling some of those. I know, you know, it can't happen all the time everywhere, and it was a weather-dependent type thing. Rajero might have done some too, I don't remember. I just can't remember. I see heads nodding. I can't remember doing one recently in District 4 that I'm aware of. Ms. Butzler maybe has something to say about this. Yeah. Yeah, you have to come to the microphone.
Yeah.
There's going to be a blank part in the video for the people like myself who like to watch old council meetings.
Yeah.
I really, only if there's a need. I just want you all to know I don't do that on the regular. Go ahead.
I just want to put out our department, the Public Service Department, we are always willing to come to neighborhood meetings or organization meetings. It could be on a specific topic, like we did the trash can rollouts. We
Yeah.
reached out and said, if you want us to come, please let us know. But if you reach out, we can make that happen, whether
Okay.
it would be me, you know, if it was code specific, we could have somebody. We have a few codes officers that love to go to meetings and talk to people and things like that, yeah.
Okay.
So just, that's an option as well.
Okay.
So.
All right. Appreciate it.
We've also, one thing that Chad mentioned, the dashboard, and some of that dashboard data stuff really started Chief Noel and I talking about how we can work more closely with our police department, in particular our community resource officers. And that's kind of where that tool, that idea for this tool came up. Now, this tool has a lot of application across a lot of other departments as well, but the concept, again, back to comprehensive, and, you know, we have additional tools we have to solve problems in neighborhoods beyond code enforcement or law enforcement or zoning, what it may be. But we have community resource officers at these neighborhood meetings on a regular basis. We have our Office of Neighborhoods, of course. We have public service, and just equipping our departments to be more, think more broadly beyond the tools that they have at their immediate disposal, right? So when our community resource officers are meeting with neighborhood groups, they can address code enforcement issues. They can address, traffic calming, having them understand the other tools that our other departments have, and be able to follow up with those issues. And again, equipping those resource officers with this map and this tool to be able to see, and then working with our other departments. So when they go to those meetings, they're kind of already there proactively. Hey, here's what we've been seeing the last month, and here's some areas we're going to be more focused on over the next month. So I love that concept, and I think we're doing it a lot, but we need to maybe we can do more of those walks. I know the walk with elected officials, the bike walk has done some stuff, and with transportation connections and things. So I love that idea of doing more of that outreach.
Councilman Roberto.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I get the sense that this is probably the last slide, and we're probably asking questions at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to say from 311, the folks that do codes enforcement, the zoning enforcement folks, public service folks, everybody that is involved, on the ground, handling all of these issues that we're talking about. I just wanted to make sure that each of you went back and thanked your folks for us, because I think, like I was trying to say earlier in the meeting, the way we're going to ask you questions today, we're talking about outlier events. And the folks that are public facing, that are going out and talking to people on the street about what they're experiencing, right? With whatever the enforcement issues are, we just really appreciate what you all do. And I wanted to just say how much I appreciate how each of you are always so available to talk about issues and be responsive. Deputy Chief Weth is particularly amazing with the level of responsivity that he is when he gets back to you. So, and just highlighting him and just saying how much I've appreciated everybody. So thank you all for doing that. And sometimes that's not an easy job to be doing. So we appreciate that too. And I really liked, the education piece that you were talking about earlier on. And then it helped us, I think, from understanding about how you're evolving what you've been doing and trying to improve this service for our residents. So I just wanted to make sure we said thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Fugit.
I'll be Gwen
I'll cut you
McKenzie
off.
for a minute. Thank you. I was just going to say a little along that. I really appreciate us having this workshop, because I think the intent of this for us is we often say, this needs to be done. And then we never know exactly what's been done, how it's been done, the improvements that we made. I really like more, colleagues, I would like more of this in the sense that we put something out and circle back. Did it work? These things that we suggested, is it happening? Is it making a difference? Because we can't serve our citizens, and that's what all of us, whether you work for the city or get elected to work for the city, are trying to do, is serve the residents of the city. And if it's working, great. If there's still other tweaks, we need to know about it. If y'all find things that you think legislatively we might need to do something about to help you do the job, I think we need to know that. So it was we're having the love fest now, but I mean, it really is true, because it is hard and you are responsive, and you only hear from us when we've heard from somebody who is beyond frustrated about something. So I appreciate the opportunity to just hear the good things, and this is improving, and just say in the future, if there's anything else, y'all can call us rather than us having to call you. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's a good place to finish. Thank you all.
Look at that, right at 6:30.
Oh, we
Y'all are-
nailed
that
it.
was impressive.
Thank you
Yeah.
all. Yeah, just to echo, we call you all. You all are always responsive. You help, and it's great to see numbers to the improvement. Anecdotally, we see things are better, but there's new things that pop up, and there'll be new challenges. But I know on behalf of all of us, we're grateful for the work that you do for the people of Knoxville, and thanks for picking up the phone when we call. So, have a good day.
right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.